Having wrestled the wild beast of corporate America in her first career, Sheila Cavanaugh took a hairpin turn and entered BC's School of Theology and Ministry in 2013 so she could learn to live more consciously in union with God. A veteran of countless Our Fathers, Hail Marys, and acts of contrition, Sheila strives to let her life be the prayer she has been reciting for so many years. Sheila?
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. I'd like to thank my fan club. I see you here. Thanks so much. I have one question. Who wants to be the change you'd like to see in the world? Who wants to be the change? Come on, fan club. I queued you up for this. Okay, prior to coming to the School of Theology and Ministry at Boston College, I had a career in corporate America. And one of the jobs I had was as a speechwriter for the vice chairman of a large financial services company headquartered right in downtown Boston. In addition to writing his speeches, one of my responsibilities was managing his correspondence. And I thought, how hard can that be? A letter here, a letter there, I can handle that. Well, what I didn't realize is that every time his name was published in the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times in an industry article or an article about the company, and it happened all the time, it would trigger about 100 letters of complaint. All of a sudden, it wasn't a letter here, a letter there. The letters was piling in. But what struck me about this phenomenon was, where were the letters of praise? Why were so many people across the landscape of America so eager to complain? Where were those people eager to say, you did a good job? Thank you for a job well done. And so I asked myself, have I ever written unprovoked letters of praise? Have I done that? And I thought, how can I complain about other people not doing it when I hadn't done it? I had done it twice, and I remembered it yet generated great results. So I said to myself, I want to be the change I'd like to see in the world. So I made a decision to wage a campaign to spread the good. And I was going to intentionally find opportunities that I could praise. So right around that time, I left my office at my lunch hour, and I went into a department store, again in downtown Boston, and I saw a young man folding sweaters and putting them on the shelves. So I went up to him and I said, "You're doing a great job." And he turned around and said in a very angry tone, "Why don't you go F yourself?" I said, this is not part of my campaign to spread the good, but that's because sarcasm rules the day in downtown Boston. My friends from the Midwest tell me the whole state of Massachusetts needs a course in customer service. I call it a free-floating rage down there. So I said, okay, forget telling people they're doing a good job in person. I got to go back to letter writing. So about a week later, I went into Macy's department store, and I walk up to the Clinique Cosmetics counter. I see a beautiful young woman, dark raven hair, exotic eyes. She looked like she came from an Egyptian urn. And I thought to myself, wow, maybe I can buy a lipstick and look like her. So I march up to the Clinique Cosmetics counter, and she starts chit-chatting with me. And I notice immediately she has a deep Eastern European accent. Now, earlier in my career, I had worked in Eastern Europe. So I thought, why don't I ask her where she's from? Maybe we can make a connection. So I said, where are you from? And she said, I am from Sarajevo, Bosnia. Now, I was shocked, because this is right after the war in Yugoslavia. And now that war occurred when Bosnia declared independence in the early 1990s, and immediately war broke out. The Christian Serbs decided that the Bosnian Muslims did not deserve independence, and so they pummeled the country. They pummeled Sarajevo. Sarajevo's in a valley. It's surrounded by mountains. And for 3 years, bombs just dropped in the city. And I knew all about that war because I had been reading about it, but I had never met anyone from that part of the world. And here I am meeting this lovely young woman at the cosmetics counter, and she came from that part of the world, and she told me she had fled with her mother during the war. which had only been 2 years prior. And I said, but how did you get out? I knew the entire city was blockaded. There were no planes, no trains, no roads, nothing. She said, my mother and I crawled under the airport in a tunnel. We climbed over a mountain range, and we walked to Zagreb, Croatia, 250 miles away. I said, okay, I have my opportunity to praise. I said, my lunch hour's over. I got to go run back to work. The minute I got back to work, I called Macy's department store. I said, I want the name of the head person. They gave me the name of the head person, and I wrote a letter that had every adjective I've learned since kindergarten. I praised this young woman. She was kind. She was eloquent. She had customer service skills. I mailed the letter, and I continued to find opportunities to praise. Well, a week later, my phone rings. It's Macy's department store. They said, this never happens. I said, I know, I'm trying to start a trend. They were so moved by this letter that they gave this young woman a shopping spree, a raise, and they sent her to New York City, to headquarters, 42nd Street. Now, I had never been there, but I was so happy. I was so happy she got to go. So I said, I'm going to go back to Macy's and befriend her. So I went back to Macy's, and she invited me to go visit her mother, and her father had been reunited with them. He had been in the war. They lived in a small working-class city north of Boston, Everett, Massachusetts. When I went to visit them, I realized they only had one lamp. We had to unplug it and move it from room to room. So what did I do? I went back to my desk, got onto the email system, sent out an email to all of my friends. Does anyone have an extra lamp? I could have lit the city of Boston. I had so many lamps, I drove them all over to Everett, and then I decided to have a clothing drive. That's when I realized that women update their clothes regularly, but men wear their clothes until they're in shreds. Can you back me up there? Can you back me up there? I had 9 boxes of beautiful women's clothes. Of course, I was a little bit tempted to do some shopping myself, but I said, no, these are for the Bosnians. So I drove them all over to Everett. Then I said to Aida, you know what? You need to apply to college. You need to have a career where you really can support your family. So I helped her to apply to the University of Massachusetts in Boston, and she entered as a music major. She was a beautiful pianist, and she told me she grew up without a piano. And I said, how is that? How did you learn how to play the piano so well? She told me that her father painted the keys of the piano on the kitchen table, and that's how she learned. And so for 4 years, she came to my office, and we went over her homework so that she could do well. And she graduated on the dean's list of the University of Massachusetts in 2003. But in the summer of 2000, she went home with her mom, and I was sent to Germany by my work. And I thought, well, how far can Sarajevo be? Why don't I fly down and meet Aida and finally see this beautiful city that I've been reading all about? Well, I flew into Sarajevo, and the city was decimated. It was a pile of rubble. But her apartment building, which had been damaged in the war, it was the old Olympic Village. The Olympics had been in Sarajevo in 1984. So I was greeted like I was a member of the royal family, because Bosnia is one European country that actually likes Americans. So I was led from apartment to apartment to meet all the Bosnians, and there were women holding the lapels of their jackets, pointing to their shoes. The clothes I had collected in Boston and driven to Everett had been shipped, unbeknownst to me, to Sarajevo. Now, what did I do during those 2 weeks? I took pictures of the people, because the people were filled with joy and gratitude, and they were beautiful. And I said, I want to remember this. Well, we went back. 4 years later, I'm flown to London, and Aida went back that summer too. So I thought, okay, London, Sarajevo, let me fly down and visit her again. And I thought, what can I bring the Bosnians? I decided that I would enlarge all these photographs. Now, I didn't know any of these people. She didn't know these people. They were all random people. They didn't speak English. They were just in her part of the city. Well, I found 90% of these people. And what was so amazing about it is that they didn't have photographs. Everything had been lost in the war. Now, the most amazing thing about that was that 2 moms who were sitting in front of an apartment building when I had photographed them 4 years earlier, were in the exact same position 4 years later. And I walked up that walk with an 8x10 color glossy, and they were so happy. Well, during that visit, Aida's mother said, we want to take you on a trip. I said, oh, yay. I love field trips. Now, what happened, this is like the beginning of Uber taxi. The men in Bosnia didn't have any jobs, so they were using their cars, as taxis. So this car pulls up to the apartment building. Of course, I'm the guest, so I sit in the front. There are no seat belts. I think this man thought he was in a NASCAR race at the Daytona Speedway. I mean, I thought I was going to get killed, but we drove for about 3 hours. And we came to a huge cathedral. We were in Medjugorje, Croatia. And Aida's family said, we know your faith is important to you, and we are so grateful for everything that you have done. We wanted to thank you. This is a Muslim family. And I said, you know what? This is what world peace is all about. Now, through Aida, I met another young woman 10 years ago. She had a 2-year-old. And I had just, with my husband, adopted our 3rd child. And I was desperate for help, and she was desperate for a job. So when desperation meets desperation, a solution can erupt. She has been with me for 10 years, is seated in my fan club back there. And she is the godmother of my daughter. Now, I want to just tell you folks, for the price of a postage stamp, you can be the change you would like to see in the world. Thank you.